Hey guys, welcome to this week's riveting art video. I have some exciting news. I was sent some free art supplies for the first time ever, and I wanted to do a little review on them. So these supplies were given to me free, but I was not paid to do this review, so all the opinions are my own. With that disclaimer aside, these are some really affordable acrylics that you can find on their website as well as on Amazon. The link to the product will be in the description. Let's go ahead and jump right into you guys seeing the product. I received this 32 pack of acrylic paint from Chalkola. It included this set of brushes, this palette, the sponge, and then here you can see all 32 tubes of paint. As you can see, there's a huge variety of color, and it all comes in this compact box for $27 US. Based on just my first impressions of the value of this pack, I do think it's a really good value. You get basically all these colors for less than $1 a tube, plus these like essential items. And honestly, I'm always in the market for a new palette and some fresh brushes, because you know, sometimes we get a little lazy and forget to clean them out, which is why I strictly buy cheap brushes. You know, and even little things you might not think about, like having a sponge. Also, my first impression of the color selection here, I'm loving that they give us 2 white paints, because I'm always running out of white first. We also have a pre-mixed gray. I mean, honestly, there's like all of these really nice neutral colors, good selection of green over here. I mean, I feel like I got all the colors I could want, and then any color I don't have could be easily mixed with this array. So we know that based on what comes in the pack, it seems to be a good deal, but let's see if it's actually good and if I can create a painting with these paints that is up to my standards. Alright, now that I officially have everything unboxed, the only thing that I would say has concerned me is I found one brush that has like a patch of bristles like glued to the outside, and it's like a little crooked. All the other brushes seem like totally fine. If anything else pops up, I'll let you know as I'm going. But literally, it's just this one brush. And it's weird because, like, the actual bristle parts of the brush are fine. There's just, like, some extra ones glued on here. And it's not that big a deal because I can just kind of rip them off. But it's just kind of funny. You know, things happen in the factory. It's not I wouldn't say that it is necessarily a deal breaker to me. But we'll see how the brushes hold up when we're actually using them. So here's me going in with a water wash of the paint using my sponge. I love to do this on my canvases just to sort of fill in some of that white space, so then when I go in with the more pigmented paint, I don't have to use so many layers. It's just a nice little base coat, an underpainting, if you will. So I found that the paint reacted with the water very well. I didn't have any issues with that. Also, as I started building up the layers, the paint is very opaque, and it blended together very nicely. I purposely kept it a little more painterly. When I started painting the clouds into my painting, I think I struggled a little bit with the opacity on the white, and looking back, I wish I had done one layer of white, let it dry, and done a second layer. That was more my mistake than the paint. I should have known. I think overall for a white acrylic paint, it honestly didn't perform too bad. I was just being a little impatient, so that's on me, not the paint. I do eventually let some layers dry, and it worked out much better. Right now I'm halfway through my painting. It is in its ugly phase, you could say. There's some parts of it I really love and some parts that I don't. And I'm not sure it's the paint's fault. It might just be my own, because I'm painting something I've never painted before. It's fine. I'm usually a portrait artist. You know, I paint things like this and things like that. So doing a landscape is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it's fine. I want to make sure that the current layer is completely dry before I go on with the next one. All the rest of the layers were pretty blendy, so it's fine if things mixed. And while I'm waiting for this layer to dry, I decided to clean off my palette, clean my brushes. And I will say these brushes are holding up pretty well. I haven't had any stray strands of brush hairs end up in the paint. When I wash the brushes, they're holding up really nice. Again, no strands of paint falling off, or strands of brush hairs coming off in the wash either. Cleaned up real nice and easy. Also the palette cleaned off really nice as well. Honestly, wait till the end for my final thoughts, because I got some things to say about this palette. Alright, once this next layer dries, we will commence painting again. As I mentioned before, landscape paintings aren't 100% my forte, but that's why I wanted to paint this one. I wanted to step outside my comfort zone. That being said, once I started layering up second layers on top of the areas that are already painted, the white was perfectly opaque. It wasn't an issue. And then what I really loved about this paint was that it was very versatile. I was able to get some smoother flat colors with the black telephone pole, but I was also able to go in with my sponge and get those thinner areas, and then on top of that I was also able to go in with my brush and get these really thick built up strokes in there. And with some of the cheaper craft acrylic paint, sometimes you can't do that. It's just too thin and it starts getting runny or just does weird things. But I found this paint worked really well at getting those nice strokes in there and keeping its texture from the brush. So I really appreciated that. Also, I loved how saturated these colors were. They just pop really well. Lastly, I really appreciated this black acrylic paint. I feel like it was super opaque. I didn't have to go over it with a couple of layers or anything like that. It just came out very smooth, flat, filled in, first try, first layer. On a non-review related note, I'm actually really happy with how my painting turned out. It's definitely out of my comfort zone, but it's really fun to challenge yourself sometimes to paint things that you don't normally paint. If anything, this kind of inspired me to paint more things like this so that I can get better at it. When I'm not good at something, I suddenly feel like I need to practice and do the thing. So you'll catch me painting more landscapes in the future. Alright, so I have finished my painting, and so I'm going to go ahead and give you my final thoughts on this paint set. So first, let's talk about all the things that come in our box. The paintbrushes. I was pleasantly surprised with the paintbrushes. I talked earlier about how I didn't have a single loose like fiber coming out of my brushes, which is very common for more affordable brushes. The only things that for the brushes is, well, I had that one with the weird like stuck fiber, but that came off super easy. Two, I kind of wish there was like a bigger one, like a inch. I believe the biggest one that was in there was this one, and then this one. Overall with brushes, I wish there was a bigger one. We had that one little hiccup with the fibers being stuck. So aside from that, I was pretty happy with the quality. We got a palette knife. I didn't use it much. I'm not much of a palette knife painter. I use it mostly to mix my paints. I was happy with that. At one point, I did try and cut the lines with the palette knife. But that brings me over to our palette. I didn't really have enough space to cut into the paint with the palette knife. You really need a big flat area in order to spread that paint thin and cut into it in order to then paint with your palette knife in lines. This palette is a little hindersome in that area. I think maybe it's just this particular shape of palette knife is best for mixing as well as like putting on big globs of paint. I'm more used to using the palette knives that are really good for cutting, and if I was to use that palette knife that I already have that is good for cutting into the paint, it probably would have fit in here a lot better than the one that came in the pack. But that's just a me thing. And then also this palette, I actually really love it. Like I said, I have glass palettes and stuff. That's what I use for my oil paints. However, when I'm using acrylic paints, the only palette I have is this little one. So big improvement from this to this. It has a total of 6 circle spots, which is enough for the rainbow, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 like mixing areas. I enjoyed the sponge. It's a pretty typical sponge that you get in a lot of art kits. I mean, there's a reason it's the typical sponge you get in art kits. It does the job. I actually have like 2 or 3 exactly like it, and honestly, it doesn't hurt to have a new one. So that is all the stuff that came with the paints, so let's talk about the paints themselves. Really glad they gave me 2 tubes of white paint because this painting alone almost used an entire tube. I mean, 75% of the tube gone. So I guess that goes to say that maybe the white paint could stand to be slightly more opaque, so that way I can use less of it. But that doesn't personally bother me. I've always been the type of person to use cheaper paints, but then when it comes to my white and my black, I tend to get more expensive brands because one good tube of expensive white paint will go so much further than a cheap white paint. However, for the colors, I had no issues with them. Very opaque, very thick. I think they're pretty good. You can always add mediums to make them flow a little smoother. Personally, I had no issues with the colors. I love the color variety. They were easy to mix. You know, sometimes you mix paints and it feels like they're working against you. These were super smooth and very easy to mix together. I was able to build up thick strokes with the paint, which is great. Sometimes with cheaper acrylics, they're way too translucent or flowy that you can't really get those big thick like on there, and I was definitely able to do that in the clouds. But I was also able to get really smooth lines here with the black paint. I honestly, any of the naysays I have are just kind of nitpicky, and there's definitely workarounds with all of this. I think for the sheer amount of paint I got, and I'm gonna pop up an image of all these paint tubes again. 32 paint tubes, okay guys? It's kind of crazy. And it was only $27 on Amazon at the time that I'm filming this. I honestly, for that price point, this is an amazing set, and I'm definitely gonna keep using these. I also love that the paint tubes come in these black little cases. I'm the type of person that I'm gonna leave them in there because it keeps it organized. I'm an organized lady. I don't like to just like dump all my paint into a bucket. If you, you know what, comment down below. Are you the type of person to just like put your paint in a bucket or keep it in the original packaging? I'm definitely a keep it in the original packaging type of gal myself. Great deal for the price. I'm gonna keep using these paints, honestly. I don't see why I wouldn't. I'm definitely gonna keep using the palette. I think that's probably my favorite thing that I got out of this whole set. Thanks so much for watching this video. Please leave a comment. What do you think about these paints? Would you find yourself buying them as well? Also a thank you to Chalkola for sending me this paint to try out for my video. So yeah, see you guys in my next video next week.